Welcome to the Tarot Coven cast. Real people, real talk, real magic. Hello out there, lovely listeners, and welcome to another bonus episode of the Tarot Coven cast. I'm your host, Jasmine.
I'm Melina.
And I'm Jekanovia.
And this time on the show, we're here to talk all about another Wheel of the Year celebration, a day you might know as the Summer Solstice, but is also known as Litha. We'll talk about what this day means and how you can honor this changing of the seasons. So let's dig in with some basics first. I mean, really, really basic, the dates. Usually this happens between June 20th and 22nd. I believe this year it's happening right on the 20th. And it usually kind of coincides with the beginning of Cancer season. So it's when the sun has reached the northernmost part of the equator. So it's actually the longest day and the shortest night of the year. And it does sort of start welcoming back in the darkness, which is kind of funny because like this is the first day of summer for us, right? And it always to me is like, oh my gosh, summer's kicking off. We're going to have so much sun. It's going to be a great season. And yet it really is the part of the year where we're starting to welcome back in the darkness. And I know in some places, the summer solstice is also known as midsummer. So technically it's the start of summer, but it is also this transition. And it's just, I think it's just nice because it reminds me that there's always that balance, right? Like, I mean, even though this is the beginning of that summer, that fiery part of the year, at least in the, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere when it's happening down there, but it really is welcoming back in that darkness. I don't know, Jekanovia, maybe you can speak to that kind of within the symbology of what this day means, but I mean, what does summer solstice, what did Litha mean to the ancestors? Why do we celebrate it and how can we honor it?
Well, I find, midsummer to me is actually the midpoint of summer. That's when it hits its peak, right? So everything is really, really hot and, the planting's done. The ancestors would have been finished all their planting now. So they would have been harvesting, their early lettuces, early fruits. Gathering for usually a big gathering. Like the whole community would gather together. They'd have a great big bonfire because the work was done. They didn't need to be at home and plowing and planting. It was like pretty much a big party.
Nice. Another question I kind of had is that as I was doing my research for this celebration on the Wheel of the Year, I started to notice some similarities between Ostara and Beltane as well, especially with that sort of fire and light, that kind of symbology. So what sets Litha apart from those dates on the wheel? Well,
Mostly because it's the peak, right? So at Imbolc, it's like that spark, that early fire, that little candle flame, right? That match.
Okay. Yeah.
And at, say, Beltane, you're looking at, that's your fire. That's when everybody's starting to gather. I'd say that's like the pre-party of midsummer. That's how I kind of think of it. Still work to do, but everybody's still getting together. But at midsummer, that's when the sun is at its peak. It's hot, it's blazing, and that's the big fire festival to me. And so that's how it's a little bit different. It's like the fire grows up until midsummer.
Right.
As the sun seems to grow, right? Your days are getting longer. And then as they start to get shorter, so does the fire get a bit smaller and smaller until you get to Yule when it's just darkness and cold.
Right. So it's kind of following that same pattern of what I was just talking about with how technically this is the start of summer, but we're actually starting to welcome in the darkness again. So this is the very peak of that fire, which will eventually start to sort of wane.
Yeah. In some traditions, this is actually the new year. So it ends and begins now.
Okay.
So it depends on who you ask. I mean, everybody's going to have their own. Some people say it's at Samhain. Other people say it's just after Yule.
Right.
So it depends on what floats your boat.
Yeah, because I have heard those other ones as well. Like typically I always hear that like the witch's new year is Samhain.
Yeah, that's the pretty much common one I find across the board. But for even in a lot of Druidic practices, the midsummer is that it's the beginning of it. Basically, the year is in two halves, right? So you've got your light half and dark half. So this is like the new year into the dark half, and then at Yule, it's the new year into the light half.
Right. Gotcha. So interesting, just how the wheel really continues to sort of make me think about that balance between light and dark and just how they always are mirroring each other. And yeah. Well, and so speaking of like how we're moving into that sort of waning period, I sort of see this day, like this summer solstice, as corresponding with the full moon. Again, it's like that peak energy, right? It's everything is really lit up. But we're about to enter that waning period, like I was saying. So there's maybe a lot of release work that we could be doing, or a reviewing, a renewing of certain goals or intentions. But what's really interesting about this year in particular is that pretty much right after we hit that like exact solstice at a time, let's say, we're actually going to have our new moon in Cancer as well as an annular solar eclipse. And this is the last eclipse. This is the last very potent eclipse, I should say, in that Cancer Capricorn axis. Like we're actually moving into a new series of eclipses for Sagittarius and Gemini. So this is like kind of a big closing out in a way. I mean, this is capping things off. This is the work that, you've been doing for the last 18 months when we were having our eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn. Like it's all sort of coming to a big culmination at this point, which feels just really like we're just really doubling down on this sort of peak energy that the summer solstice is bringing. So I just had to mention that because I think, I don't know, it's the beginning of Cancer season. It's the summer solstice. It's a new moon. It's an eclipse. I just think the energy is going to be on fire that day. So something to be prepared for sure.
Are we in Mercury retrograde at that point too?
Yes, I believe Mercury retrograde starts on the 17th, so it will have just kicked off. So yeah, so even more Cancer energy. And what were you about to say there, Elena?
Oh, the moon. I wrote that down in my notes too, like that I feel like it is moon energy, because I feel like everyone, you're being really highlighted during solstice. Everything that you've worked for the other part of the year is like really coming out, or what you when you've been integrating now, like what you've been working on, you can bring it out to the light. It's a time I feel like where you need to be seen.
Yeah, I love that. It just keeps going back to that real peak energy, that full, as Jekanovia was saying, it's like the full fire, right? Well, so let's talk about like some practices, rituals, activities that we can do on Litha on the summer solstice. Jekanovia, why don't you kick us off with a few ideas?
Well, of course, it's always fun to have a bonfire. I know where we are today, that may not be allowed where you're living. So maybe some candles, or even maybe a virtual gathering online with some friends, and you guys can just have, at Christmas when they have that Yule log
Yes,
channel,
yeah.
have that running in the background, they just bring that fire energy into it. It's a great time for journaling, for writing. It's like storytelling, right? So tell your story to the world. Things like, traditionally they used to actually jump over flames, like a bonfire. So I know we mentioned at Beltane where they would walk between two fires. Well, at midsummer, they would actually leap over the fire for good luck.
Okay.
So I can imagine how much fun that was sometimes, but,
yeah. How much mead had they had at that point?
probably lots.
Well, and speaking of the fire, when I was trying to come up with ideas for activities, of course, my mind went to the bonfire. But I was also thinking, like, what can we do? Because come June 20th, who knows what the world is going to be like? Who knows if we're going to still be able to, be out with public or be out in general, or whatever the case may be. So I was thinking, how do you bring the fire more inside? So maybe it's just the kind of foods you're cooking. We talked about this a little bit at Beltane, but just adding like spice to what you're eating, or maybe you are, if you have a barbecue, maybe you're using the barbecue. It's like very, I don't know if literal is the right word. It's like, I don't know, but it's bringing that fire energy to your food somehow, right?
The grilling is why one of the things that when I think of summer solstice, I think of being outside grilling. And then if you can't get outside, like camping, I know right now there's a lot of people that want to do that.
Right.
But like we're setting up our backyard slowly so we can be able to like spend nights out there. So I feel like if you can set your backyard up, or if you can like do something social distancing like that, where you can do it in your backyard, that's what I'm thinking about doing this year. For like a ritual is hopefully having the backyard ready for that by that time.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to take advantage of whatever space we might have, no matter how small, right?
Blanket forts in the living room would work.
Ooh, that's fun. You know, that also just reminds me of being like the blanket fort idea just reminds me of being a kid. And being a kid, I don't know why, but I always associate with summer. It's just like that freedom of being outside and being able to run around with your friends and stuff, right? So it's got like that same kind of energy. I really like that idea.
Yeah, it's like inner child work. And so why
Yes.
not build a
Yeah,
blanket fort?
totally.
I feel like that's a lot of the energy too, is inner child. And so a lot of playful, when I think of fairies, I think of childhood and playfulness. And so I love that you said the forts, because that's what I've pretty much been doing every weekend, is building forts. There's nothing really else to do. You know, I don't want to go to the park or anything like that and be around a lot of people. So it's like we've been doing nothing but crafting and building inside.
Yeah, that's awesome though. So I was also going to say, I mean, in whatever way, however this looks for you when you do like a gratitude practice, but giving gratitude to the sun, to the warmth, to the light that has been sort of nourishing us since, let's say, Yule, and that will continue to nourish us, even though we are moving into that waning period. And so maybe doing some stuff like on an altar. I don't know, Jekanovia, do you have any ideas for what people could do for an altar to sort of give thanks to, you know, the sun, the light, the warmth?
For sure. I mean, obviously there's the candles, the standard altar things, but I mean, you can collect flowers. And if you can't get out to collect flowers, use fake flowers. I mean, if you practice, or sorry, if in your practice you use a lot of deities, then they're still going to appreciate that, because they're going to know that that's what you're able to do right now. So you can make flower chains or vines, or I like to put some of my potted plants, my indoor plants, through the summer, so at midsummer exactly, on my altar space. I do a lot of divination work because it's a really good time for divination. It's actually Midsummer is sacred to the goddess Caradwyn and her cauldron, and she is the goddess of wisdom and knowledge and prophecy. So it's a really good time to start looking ahead to the next 6 months. So on your altars, you could put symbols of what you want to manifest, or what you want to let go of, or, you know, setting new intentions. So it's a perfect time to really just revamp everything and start from scratch.
Amazing. And what kind of flowers or what kind of herbs would you maybe say are really potent for this date on the wheel?
I would go mostly with things that are in season. So your chamomile, your thyme, lavender is really popular, some rosemary, mint, rose, whatever you can get your hands on. I mean, it's right. But those are my favorites.
Yeah. And then maybe we want to be working with colors that make you also think of the sun, right? So gold, yellow, red. I mean, whether you want to represent that in candles or flowers, whether real or created, maybe in crystals as well. And I don't know, speaking of crystals, Elena, I'm sure you have some crystals for us that we can work with at the summer solstice.
Yes, there's actually a couple that really stand out to me for this. And there's one crystal that I've been wanting to get for this, and it's amber. I'm surprised I don't have that. It's actually one of my favorites, but I really like it because it has that creativity aspect to it, and it helps release like that any inner traumas. It's a protection stone. It has that strong psychic protection too. So like Jackanova, you mentioned, now's the time for a lot of divination work. Whenever I do a lot of divination work, I like to keep psychic protection stones around me. And then of course carnelian, which just reminds me of like a fire aspect. And it's really good for courage. I know a lot of the ancestors wore carnelian, like when they had to face like a really tough situation. It really gave them that strength. Or if like they were going into like battle, they would wear carnelian, and it helps calm anger. So it reminds me of like calming the flames. And it also helps, boost with fertility. So it reminds me of that, like, sun adding to like the growth of our crops. So it's like that fertile energy. And then I also love sunstone. And just being able to charge these under the sun. And then the sunstone for me is really that leadership, and it helps for manifestation. So if you are like putting up pictures of things that you want to manifest in your altar, it's really nice to have like maybe a sunstone grid to represent, like to manifest help manifest those things that you want this year. I've been trying to incorporate more crystal grids into my practice, and I really notice it does amplify the energies of what I'm working with. So I'm really being like called towards making a crystal grid for sunstone.
And really quickly, I mean, I feel like maybe in season 2 we'll have an episode, whether it's a bonus episode or a full episode about crystals. But just for anybody that might want to work with a crystal grid on the summer solstice, can you just like briefly explain what that is and how you might set it up? I'm sure everyone could Google it, but maybe you have like a little bit more personal insight.
Yeah, I actually have one right now on my altar. And I was just really called to wanting to kind of connect more to my third eye, my intuition, just more to trust myself in the moments where I need like just quick decision making. And so I wanted to get a stone for like my third eye. I was going to go with amethyst, but something just drew me to ametrine, the amethyst and citrine. And so I put it in the middle, and then I just created an eye with clear quartz points, because clear quartz is like it's kind of like your go-to to work. Like you can pair it with any stone, and it'll like magnify the energies of the stone that you're working with. So I created like the outside of the eye as the grid, and then I put the ametrine right in the middle.
Okay.
And then,
so basically it's just like creating a shape that kind of goes with the energy of the crystal or crystals that you're working with. Cool.
Yeah. And then just depending on what your intentions are and what you need in the moment, whether it's like stress relief, anger relief, bringing harmony into the home, or bringing harmony to work, or, you need luck on getting a new job, whatever it is that your intentions are, you just can set up a crystal grid for it. Set your intentions, thank the crystals. I always thank my crystals for helping and, my assistance in what I need. And you can leave it up as long as you want. I just leave it until intuitively my guides are like, okay, you're done, on to the next thing,
So you said you're being called to make one for summer solstice. Do you know what you're going to do yet? Or is it just kind of sparking for you right now?
It's sparking for me, but I'm not sure what it's going to look like. I may just search around, and I have a couple of crystal books that that have grids in them. I'm not sure if they have one dedicated towards like the wheel of the year, which would be pretty awesome. But I am not sure what it's going to look like.
Yeah, no worries. Maybe if you get one set up before we put the episode out, you can send us a pic and we'll add it to the Instagram or something.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I can definitely think about what it's going to look like since summer solstice is coming right around the corner. Mm-hmm. And I've already started like picking candles for it, so for my altar. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, I wanted to go back to when we were talking about being outside and maybe barbecuing or figuring out how to bring sort of that fire energy to our food. But just in general, I'm just wondering, Jaconovia, are there, I don't know if ceremonial is the right word, but are there like traditional food and drink that would be consumed around the summer solstice?
Yeah, pretty much anything that was growing at that point. So, your lettuces, any of your leafy greens are probably big hit. Right. Any citrus kind of tasting, like your lemons, your limes, your oranges. So, lemonade is a really good drink to have. Like maybe throw some mint in with it. That would be a good, nice magical elixir. Tomatoes, strawberries, raspberries, even the blossoms of these things you can throw into a salad. So it's bringing in that, everything that's available and coming into season right now. It's about fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and, what the earth is giving us at this time.
Nice. Okay. Love it. And then I kind of want to end the show with some talk about tarot and, maybe a special little spread that we're going to create for you guys. But are there any other practices and rituals that you guys wanted to bring up for summer solstice before we get to the tarot stuff? I actually wanted to ask Jekanovia about oak trees around this time, because I did read some stuff in my sort of internet sleuthing that was talking about oak trees being sort of a doorway or a way to cross the threshold, I guess, between sort of the waxing part of the year and the waning part of the year. And they were suggesting maybe like having a little chat with an oak tree. And I mean, maybe if you don't have access to an oak tree, you could just have a chat with a tree that's around you. But is there any legitimacy to this, or what's the deal with oak? Anything there?
Oh, for sure. With oak, it's very sacred to the Druids. It's considered a doorway to the other side, so you can communicate with, your deities or with ancestors through the oak tree.
Okay.
It's actually very, very sacred in my own practice, but I don't have any oak trees anywhere near me. But another reason it's very popular for the midsummer celebrations is because it's when the oak tree, the oak king, I suppose, symbolizes the light half of the year. And at midsummer, he battles the holly king, and the holly king defeats him, which starts the dark half of the year. And then at Yule, they battle again, and the oak king wins. So there's a lot of mythology around that as well.
Gotcha.
But
Very
totally
interesting.
legit information.
I thought that was so much fun, and the idea of like having a chat with a tree, I don't know, that sounds fun. And I think, Jekanovia, I swear this is something you already do.
I sit grandfather pine all the time, and we have lots of chats.
That's so awesome. I love that.
There's a tree up the street from my house at the school that's up the street from my house that I go for walks up, and there's a tree that always calls to me. It hasn't talked back, but I always just give it my gratitude and just tell them what's going on when I sit in meditation. But I just love trees. I am a tree hugger. I do hug trees and stuff and plants, and but I'm actually waiting for one of my good friends to put together her animal communication course, and she's going to be including plants and trees because she does this all the time.
Oh, wow.
And they actually have names. Yes, when you ask them questions, they can respond, and they will give you their names and their story and what they've been through. So I actually have met people that do this a lot in their practice, and it's amazing. Animals, insects, they all have things to say and wisdom, and
even snakes.
Yes, even girl, let me tell you, I freaking hate spiders, and they've been following me my whole freaking life, and now I know it's because they are meant to. And every single time, like, I'm in a situation and like I think I know the answer, I swear to you, a spider will pop out of my room out of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, that's my answer. Like, I already know that I'm not supposed to do something.
I'm so grateful that a snake isn't doing that for me.
Oh, God, you and my mom. She will die if she sees a snake in this house.
Well, so in our notes, Jekanovia, I've noticed you've mentioned something about fairy magics, which also came up at Beltane. So is it kind of along the same lines for Litha, or is there a little bit of a different magic here?
It's slightly different. At Litha, the fairies actually travel. That's when they kind of go around and visit the different homes. So you leave out milk and honey for them, so that they'll leave a little blessing at your house. Now, I know some practitioners are like, no, don't talk to the fairies. I've never had an issue, but I do urge you, if you're wondering about it, then do some research and make your own decision.
Sure.
Not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying in my experience, there's never, ever been a problem. So, but yeah, I do love my fairy magics at this time of year because they just remind you just to laugh and have fun and not take things so seriously.
Yeah. Which, again, kind of feels like that inner child work, too, a time. I mean, not that everybody's childhood was so blissful, let's say, but there are those at least memories, I think, from childhood. Could you briefly tell us why somebody might not want to interact with the fairies, or do you think people should just kind of go out and do their own research on the subject?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I obviously will say, yes, go do your own research. Don't take my word as, as scripture.
Yeah.
But some people, I think they get nervous because they can be tricksters. And if you don't respect them, they'll wreak a little bit of havoc in their own way. Some people will say that they bring bad luck, but again, it's not something that's ever been in my experience.
Okay.
I think a lot of it stems from in Ireland, fairies are not friendly. They are not something you want anywhere near you. So I think it might just be a language thing. Perhaps what I call a fairy isn't what they call a fairy. Maybe they would call what I deal with more of an elemental spirit. So that's just a theory. I don't know if that's actually fact. But I do have friends. I have friends who actually live in Ireland, and they have a spot on their farm. They have a huge farm, but there's this fairy ring of trees, and they will not cross it. They will not put their animals on it. They will not let their children play in it. It's absolutely, they will not go near it. So it is still very, very much alive over there. The fear around fairies. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I do wonder if it is just that difference culturally, and if it's maybe just something that you're referring to as one thing is for them another thing, right? You don't want to cross the line for somebody's traditions like that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I always say do your research, and whatever you're comfortable with, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing, actually, that I don't know why I didn't mention before, it's really good with your altar space, is at Midsummer, is to discard everything that you did at Yule. So if you had spell works, or if you had maybe some old tools that you had that you're not using anymore, it's the time to, put it in your bonfire, or, if it's natural stuff, you can bury it and whatnot.
Right.
So, because what that does, it almost completes that spell. So it's not that the spell no longer exists. It's just you acknowledging that, yep, it's there and it works. So I'm just going to let this all go.
Yeah. Well, and I think that works really nicely, especially this year with it being this sort of final eclipse in Cancer at the new moon. And speaking of that, I mean, I know we often set intentions at the new moon. It's iffy on whether or not we should set intentions on a solar eclipse. Again, it's one of those things you should read about it, decide for yourself what resonates with you. But sometimes it's more about doing like that, like sort of cleaning up your space, getting rid of stuff that you no longer need around, and then maybe a little bit after the eclipse has sort of perfected, then we can move into intention setting because we're fully sort of moved on from that previous energy. So that kind of all fits really nicely together.
Yeah, I wonder too if, say, you really do want to manifest something during the eclipse, maybe don't manifest the thing, but instead release what's blocking you from manifesting it.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So maybe just switching that paradigm a little bit.
Yeah, it's like not about starting something new, but rather, maybe even if you want to stop doing a certain habit, you're manifesting the end of that habit, let's say.
I like the idea of the new moon not being just setting intentions for the things that you're trying to manifest, but maybe setting intentions for the things, like you said, to help you get to the things that you want to manifest. Because I'm not going to lie, sometimes I don't want to set intentions on the new moon. I feel like, I feel like I kind of do that almost daily when I journal. So I love that you just gave me a new idea for the new moon ritual. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes, for sure. And I mean, especially around an eclipse, because it just has all of those heightened and sort of, like eclipses bring about change, but in a sort of more sudden way than we might be used to, right? So it's just got different energy to it. But all right, well, I think we can move into talking about some tarot cards. I was just thinking about, tarot cards that you could maybe put on your altar or just put out at your desk to kind of bring in their energy, sort of maybe just a little bit before the summer solstice, through the summer solstice, and maybe a couple of days after, whatever kind of floats your boat in that regard for timing. Or cards maybe that you want to dive into more fully, maybe create some spreads around specific cards, or again, just take in their energy. So what came up for me was obviously the Sun card, makes a lot of sense. The Queen of Wands really has that fiery energy for me. I also wrote down the Chariot because it represents Cancer. So, and we're moving into Cancer season at the same time. But I really think it's sort of subjective. I know, Jekanovia, you've got a really great list here that I want to hear about as well. But I just wanted to say that I think it would be any card that really lights you up, I think would be the perfect card to work with at this time, right? So for me, it might just be the Magician because that card just really brightens my day. Although I work with that very frequently, so I might want to switch it up, but I think it's just maybe a little subjective, and maybe there's even a specific deck that you want to start working with that has maybe brighter imagery or more, let's say, summary sort of visuals and stuff like that. But Jekanovia, I'd love to hear from you what cards you think we can be working with at this time.
Well, the wheel, obviously, because that's, the turning of the seasons. It's constantly flowing. As much as you want to stop or go backwards, you can't. It's always forward movement. So it's that reminder, right? The sun, I said as well, as you did, illumination, that fiery energy.
Yeah.
10 of Cups, because it's kind of a celebration. Things are good. There's no rain. There's no storms going on. Things are good right now.
Yeah.
So I like to really embody that. 9 of Pentacles, that's, you're creating your abundance. You're standing in your Garden of Eden, per se.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 of Wands is great for your prophecy and kind of looking ahead, because in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, of course, he's holding the crystal ball. And then the High Priestess, again, prophecy, that divine wisdom, that intuition.
Right. Beautiful. And what about you, Elena? Do you have any cards that you would want to add to this list, or cards that are sort of calling out to you right now in terms of that really fiery solar energy?
Yeah, I actually have down the sun as well. Earlier I mentioned the moon too, because it just reminds me of that really bright illumination. I also have down the 10 of Cups, just that family, home card. I wrote down the Queen of Pens. I just feel like because of that like abundant and that creating like her garden, like it just really reminded me of like a summer celebration.
Yeah.
9 of Pens and 4 of Wands, because I feel like it's your homecoming, it's a celebration as well. And then 6 of Cups, because it just reminds me of the childhood, happy moments, child just being free. The Chariot. For I feel like just because it just gives us that Cancerian vibe, and then also just knowing to take charge of what you want to manifest. And then of course I have the High Priestess as like my main card that I'm going to keep up on my altar, just to keep in connection with my inner wisdom and just like prophecy, and because that's me in the tarot. So I think I'll always have that card in my altar, but for sure on the summer solstice.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the Magician too, right? Like it's kind of just always out, so it's always a card that I'm working with, but I don't know. I can't, it just lights me up. I can't help it, so. Well, and speaking of tarot, as always, the Coven is going to get together and create a spread specifically for Litha for the summer solstice. So when we put in the show notes, there will be a link, and you can just use the code SUMMER to access that VIP tarot spread. And yeah, I think that's it for us for this bonus episode. Anything else to add, Jekanovia?
No, just same as always. Make it your own. Don't feel like you have to follow anybody else's plan. It's more powerful when it's geared just to you and your own energy.
What about you, Elena? Anything else?
Just have fun with it, and enjoy being outdoors if you can.
Yeah.
Yes. And just really put your heart and soul into what you really manifest. And shine your light, like no matter what, even if you feel like it's wrong, if you need to get a message out, just shine your light. You've been hiding and degrading for too long. Like I feel like it's time. Summer solstice is time this year for everyone to really step out.
Yeah, like maybe if you can't get outside to be in that sun, you kind of got to become your own sun in a way. Shine the light from within. Yeah.
From within. Oh, I love it. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I think you guys summed it up beautifully too. Well, yeah, so that's going to do it for us. Elena, where can everyone find you on social media?
I am at Mars_Elena_Lightworker on IG.
And what about you, Jekanovia?
I am at tarot_and_time on Instagram.
Awesome. And you can find the Coven at Tarot Coven Cast on Instagram. You can find me at the.written.witch on Instagram. And we'll be back soon with another brand new episode. But thanks for listening, and have a very good summer solstice. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this bonus episode of the Tarot Coven Cast. Stay tuned for our next bonus episode all about Lunasa, and our next regularly scheduled episode all about imposter syndrome. And until then, everyone, keep making magic.
Yeah, talk to the plants in your home, the ones that you have in your space.
That I do all the time.
Yeah.
And in fact, I talk to them in accents because I like to switch it up with them. I like to keep them on their toes, so.